for next left onto Dover Road. Continue for 1.5 miles.
Strong words. Background now. Take your. By the way, I'm informed a number of times, and if we have these conversations, I do have to tell you that you can't name the hospital. But I do think that many times you've phoned me and you've said, and the treatment my mum got or my grandma got at the Ferrari General Hospital was terrible, and there was a cover-up. I did think that when I started reading this yesterday, so we may come to some of those stories. Let's get the full background first. LBC's political editor, Theo Usherwood reports. Theo.
The NHS needs major surgery. That's the view of Jeremy Hunt, who spent the weekend listing the problems with our health service. Among them, a failure to be honest about avoidable deaths, to the point that when he was health secretary between 2012 and 2018, officials would meet behind his back to work out how to persuade him not to write letters apologising to families who had lost loved ones. Yesterday, Mr Hunt said the NHS needed to change.
Given our national commitment to the NHS, we should want it to be the safest, highest quality care anywhere, and it isn't always. And I talk about some things that people have heard of, like the need to train more doctors, but other things that perhaps less talked about, like the blame culture we have, which makes it incredibly difficult for doctors, nurses, midwives to speak openly when things go wrong, which means it's very, very difficult to learn from mistake.
The post-COVID waiting list backlog now stands at more than 6 million. That's 1 in 9 waiting for routine surgery. Meanwhile, in the southwest, you can now wait for more than an hour and 20 minutes for an ambulance if you have a heart attack or stroke. Lord Adebowale, the chairman of the NHS Confederation, said he agreed with the former health secretary.
Jeremy Hunt is also very clear in his previous utterances on this issue that it's important that people feel they're able to admit mistakes and come forward and be transparent. So it is a question of, yes, accountability, responsibility and learning, and I would agree with him on all those issues, as would my members.
But others like GP Sarah Jarvis are much more sceptical about the timing of Mr Hunt's intervention.
You have to ask yourself why Jeremy Hunt is asking these questions or making these comments now, and why he didn't make them all the time that he was health secretary.
Why now? That's a question also asked by a number of Mr Hunt's colleagues on the back benches. Is it because he has his eyes on a leadership bid?
Well, I know you would like to create a suggestion that I would want something different, but I really hope we can. But I do also hope we recognise that in order to do that, we have a big mountain to climb in terms of winning back the support of many of our core voters, not just in the south of England, but particularly in the south of England, who are very concerned at the situation we're in.
Pointed criticism of the PM there when he says constituents in the south, like in his southwest Surrey constituency, are worried about the current situation the PM is in.
Just before we get into expert commentary, the world and his mistress knows that Jeremy Hunt wants to be the leader of the Conservative Party. I can't get it, Theo, and there are valid criticisms of the NHS, and I've always been one to say I think the money could be, in many areas, better spent.
In 1/4 mile, keep right to continue towards Tuns Lane, A355.
After what he's been through, after what the NHS has done during COVID and the way that...
Can you deduce what he's trying to do?
We might well ask whether it's about attention. Look at me, this is me trying to talk about the reforms that are needed and trying to present himself, not necessarily to the country, but to his colleagues on the back benches, that he has the stature to lead major reforms of institutions like the NHS.
Keep right.
Okay, all right. Theo Usherwood reporting. Your views coming in a moment. And again, as I read that, I thought the times you've told me that you've lost loved ones, not just during the pandemic, and you've tried to get results, and you've said that there is, I'm going to actually use a word I think that the former health secretary is an omerta. There's a sort of a agreement of silence. Let's get to some expert commentary first, though. Jenny Vaughan, Dr. Jenny Vaughan, chairs the Doctors Association in UK and is quoted in one of the newspapers today, The Guardian, saying that Mr. Hunt is correct in saying...
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the first exit onto the M4 slip road to London, Heathrow Airport.
I understand, Doctor, that perhaps he could have done more. Good morning.
Yes, thanks Nick, thanks for having me on the show. Well, yes, Jeremy Hunt did leave the League Health Service for 6 years, and he is concerned about a cover-up culture, but I have to say, it's not a culture that I particularly recognise. It's certainly, we've had recent healthcare scandals that we need to give all of our attention to, but what I think the failing here is that the focus seems to be on the covering up of mistakes where death and harm has happened, rather than trying to look at why they might have happened in the first place. Now, the NHS has actually become the first healthcare system in the world to publish numbers of avoidable deaths. And where harm has happened, we often know that that's overwhelmingly related to staff shortages and lack of resources. I think it's far less comfortable for a former health secretary to talk about how his own government...
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
...resource the NHS. And also, when he was health secretary, there was a very difficult doctor's strike. And during that doctor's strike, many hundreds of doctors actually left this country and either went to Australia or chose different careers. I think that could have been handled in a much more compassionate way, and we're still suffering the effects of that today. So I say yes, have insight. And why I do say that Jeremy Hunt is right is that I actually work with him on a number of things, and that includes blame culture. He's on the nail there, but that applies across healthcare, not just the NHS. That also applies to the private healthcare system, which seems to have got off its scot-free. And there's a cover-up culture there too. So let's talk about healthcare, and let's talk about the 12 billion additional funding that needs just to keep pace with all the COVID, the fact that we need to catch up after COVID. The healthcare needs 12 billion, and then an ongoing 2 billion every year. Where's that money coming from? And it needs to come to the NHS now, and its staff.
Doctor, finally and briefly, if you can, as a senior representative of parts of the NHS, how do you think NHS staff will remember the tenure of Jeremy Hunt as Secretary of State for Health?
Well, I don't think it will be with fondness. I don't think it will. But where Jeremy needs to, he does recognise the blame culture, which is something that does need sorting out. But I disagree with him with this complete rogue state analogy.
I'm grateful for your time, Doctor. Jenny Vaughan chairs Doctors Association UK. Listening to that at 12 after 7 is Angus Dalgleish, who's Professor of Oncology at the University of London, often seen writing publications such as the Daily Mail and the Spectator. Broadly, how would you respond to Jeremy Hunt's assertions, particularly given the fact that he had 6 years to fix it and he's been out of post for 4 years? Good morning, Professor.
Good morning. Just staggering, really.
You're not holding back then?
I lobbied very strongly when he was in post on many issues, and not only just negatively, but putting forward a very positive plan how to sort the NHS out. And all I ever got back was generic letters, which clearly showed that whoever wrote them hadn't read my letter. And it wasn't just me, I thought perhaps it was just me, but very senior colleagues had all offered the same kind of advice, what needed to be done, and we were treated with contempt. And for him to basically say that he's in a position to do something about the NHS now, when he did nothing for 6 years, and he was very arrogant and treated us, I think, with a contempt which was not fitting for somebody holding such a senior position in the land who actually wants to do something about it. And I think what we're hearing now is a leadership challenge.
The NHS is a rogue system, full stop. Discuss. How would you respond, Professor?
Well, it absolutely is, because of one of the articles I wrote, which ended up in the Spectator, was the 4 crumbling pillars of the NHS, and I think I've discussed this before. I actually found 23, but I was told to narrow it down just so ones we could discuss. But the fundamental structure is completely wrong. This purchaser-provider split, where one group of people purchase services of another, that takes up 8% of the budget. It is completely asinine to think that that's going to be useful when there's no actual money at the point of service changing hand. And the purchaser-provider initiative has been one of the biggest wastes of money going. Basically, 11 billion was borrowed for new hospitals, for which we owe, over the years, about 97 billion. And I think those figures are only going to go up. And the litigation problem has not been addressed. In spite of pointing this out, it can be addressed by using the Australian system. And the final bit that I really do think we have to go right back to the NHS worked wonderfully when the clinicians basically decided what was necessary, what needed triage, and we had administrators to make sure it happened. Now we have...
I have to leave it only for time reasons. Thank you. I'm grateful you have more time, but I'm so sorry, Angus Douglas, Professor of Oncology at the University of London. We are already late to news. Thank you for that. Just a couple of emails from the top of the pile here. This comes in from David. I want to know what Hunt means by rogue. I worked in the NHS as a registered nurse through the obscenity you know as austerity. My pay was frozen for 10 years. My standard of living dropped noticeably. I left nursing after 34 years early. I see. Charles in St Albans. Hunt makes a pig ear of everything he comes in contact with. He's a bloody nerve criticising the department he was in charge of. Make him the Rwanda minister, preferably based in Rwanda. I like that idea. More calls coming in. Also coming up after the news last night, a right royal pageant fit for a queen. And here's Dame Helen Mirren playing an earlier queen, Queen Elizabeth I.
I therefore speak on behalf of a grateful nation and Commonwealth when I give you our sincere and most loving thanks.
And it's good to see the Queen, of course, able to get that, albeit using a sort of crook, as it were, or stick. We're looking at it later in the hour. 7:16 LBC News headlines, and Simon Conway.
Boris Johnson will visit Belfast later as the row over Northern Ireland's post-Brexit trading arrangements continues. Limits on the police use of stop and search powers will be lifted as part of the government's strategy to tackle violent crime. Survivors and bereaved relatives have backed the idea of a memorial garden at the site of Grenfell Tower. LBC weather, rain will move north, becoming warm and dry in the south, a high of 23 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Joanne Webb. Long delays on the M1 southbound to junction 11 at Dunstable. It's because of an accident and traffic's now being held and there are long queues on the approach. Also, problems continue on the M20. Still restrictions both ways between junctions 8 at Leeds Castle and 9 at Ashford because of the ongoing problems at the Port of Dover. One lane's closed on the A13 eastbound at the Five Bells interchange. That's also following an accident. Very busy on the A2 westbound from Eltham to the Kidbrooke interchange, and long delays this morning northbound to the Blackwall Tunnel. It's slow from before the Woolwich Road flyover, and on the underground severe delays on the Metropolitan and District lines.
LBC.
The Great British Getaway. It may not be the hottest or even the most reliable, but it's ours.
Fish and chips on the beach.
Remember that seagull stole them chips?
Bike riding along the canal.
Remember when we saw the ducklings?
Camping with an open fire.
With yummy marshmallows.
Book your free vehicle safety check at quicfit.com or visit your local centre so car troubles don't get in the way of making memories. QuickFit, drive away happy every time.
Call Nick Ferrari now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC. At Lidl, we're big on a summer of quality for all. So it's time to get those Barbies out with 2 Vermondo vegan burgers, just $1.59. 2 Seabass fillets with butter for $3.69. And 6 British Big Dog hot dog sausages, just $2.99. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores, excludes NI. Your open plan office. Let's face it, it's noisy with zero privacy. So, speak to the glass office people. They'll transform your workspace with versatile glass partitions. There's minimal disruption. They can work at night and weekends. And no hidden costs. That's pretty handy when you're running a business. Use their online pricing tool to see how cost effective it can be. theglassofficepeople.co.uk, creating new spaces in places.
A word to all drivers. With Free Now, the mobility super app, you can expect a lot more of this.
Please visit tonight, driver. Until we get there.
Time do you finish?
But on the plus side, when you join the Free Now driver community, you'll have access to our ever-growing passenger base. Sign up today and get 0% commission in your first 30 days. You'll also get a £200 bonus after completing 50 trips and 14 days of onboarding. We hope this makes up for more of the same old questions.
Busy night?
Search Free Now drivers in your app store today to start driving. Subject to availability, T's and C's apply.
Global Academy, a unique media school like no other.
It's amazing what is offered here.
Kickstart your career in media. Visit globalacademy.com.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
7:20 is the time. Coming to your calls. John, you'll be the first caller. David, you're in line as well. Quickly through the front pages you're waking up to, or in some instances, of course, you're going to bed to. Should we celebrate the good news? I have to say, I didn't see it, but I've seen a lot of still photographs and some TV coverage. But the Queen looked in fantastic form. I'm delighted to report, after concerns of her mobility, she is using a sort of crook. One calls her an extended stick. I don't know. Radiant, happy, and simply glorious is the praising front page of the Daily Mail. Top one is the Sun. This is the fact that Tom Cruise was also there. There is quite a lot of comment on social media. Mr. Cruise almost seemed to make an event about himself by going walkabout
in 2 miles at junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
Detracted from Her Majesty, but anyway, there we are. The Daily Mirror decides to go with it anyway. Queen steps out for a royal giggle. One has to say, yes, she did look to be enjoying herself immensely and laughing, so we'll find out that through. The LBC website goes with the story we're starting with, and you're calling about time for major surgery. Jeremy Hunt slams rogue NHS health system. Policing for a couple of the front pages for the Times. You are not the thought police, top officers are told. This is Andy Cook, the new Chief Inspector of Constabulary, saying police forces, as I said, are not thought police, must focus on driving down crime, given that charge rates are at the lowest in more than 30 years. Well, that's wonderful, he says that going in. Let's keep an eye on it. A lot of them say that going in, and then for whatever reason they seem to lose some of their will and verb, but we'll keep an eye on it. Different story with The Guardian on policing. Police leaders have accused Priti Patel of a power grab that would allow her to intervene in local law enforcement matters, and silence chiefs who want to speak out on issues deemed politically sensitive. That plays into the story we're doing in the next hour, which is an increase in stop and search powers. Yes, you did hear that correctly. An increase in stop and search powers. The drumbeat of tensions between the United Kingdom and Brussels and the European Union continues. The Daily Telegraph PM attacks Brussels over cost of living crisis. Similar theme for the Eye. PM's gamble risks trade war with the EU. The Financial Times looks at global affairs. Sweden and Finland to herald new era with NATO applications. And it is worth thinking just for a moment, if President Putin's actions, 70, nearly 80 days ago, were to try and ward off the threat of NATO on his borders, he's singularly managed to now succeed in bringing yet more NATO presence around other parts of Mother Russia. And that plays into the final front page, which is the Metro, Ukraine's defiant promise. And there is the winning Kalush Orchestra in Turin on Saturday night, having won the Eurovision Song Contest. Tremendous work, by the way. Let's just mention him one last time. Sam Ryder, who came in a very strong second. Again, I'm afraid I didn't watch it all. Came in a very strong second, one has to say, but for the extraordinary outpouring of love and support, probably would have won it. But there we are. Kyiv will host Eurovision, says President Zelensky, and one day it will be in Mariupol. Yes, I think the idea that it would be Mariupol in 12 months' time was a bit of a push. All right, this is what you want to say about the NHS. John in Enfield. Go ahead, John, your view. Good morning.
Oh, hello, Nick. Yeah, nice to speak to you. Yeah, every time I hear him, I get so angry, because remember under his watch, there was a study by the government, it's 2016, about a scenario if we have was it called Operation Cygnus, where they did a research to say what would happen in case of a pandemic,
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah. There on the table, one just to keep it is don't invest.
This is where they found out how short of ventilators they were, wasn't it? Do you remember?
Exactly, but it was the whole thing in case of a pandemic.
That's right.
Basically,
that's right.
He chose just to ignore that and rely on a just-in-time scenario. And his wife is Chinese. It goes back to this whole thing.
So why is the nationality of his wife relevant in this?
Well, basically, the whole PPE buying of this PPE relied on stuff coming from China. And
I don't think his wife was involved in this.
No, but it just brings up question marks with the whole government, including Matt Hancock. Yeah.
All right. Okay. I mean, I'm really interested in your first points. You get straying into dangerous territory because, to my knowledge, I mean, we'll wait. There are various inquiries will have to take place, but there's nothing. And I think just because you have a Chinese wife, you might be involved in the supply of PPE is, respectfully, John, a bit of a stretch. But I'm grateful for your first point. Thank you for that. I have to move on anyway. David, you'll be the next caller, but let's feature another story, which is, of course, as you were hearing on LBC.
In a quarter of a mile at Junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
Gendron has broken on NBC.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Jose Diaz-Balart. Good afternoon. We're
Exit at Junction 3.
News out of Buffalo, New York. A mass shooting at a Tops grocery store.
Subsequently addressed by President Joe Biden.
In a quarter of a mile at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the 4th exit onto the Parkway, A312.
All of you pray for the victims and their families and a devastated community. I've been receiving updates from my team in the White House that's in close contact with the Justice Department. We're still gathering the facts, but already the Justice Department has stated publicly that is investigating the matter as a hate crime, racially motivated act of white supremacy and violent extremism. As they do, we must all work together to address the hate that remains a stain on the soul of America.
To David Smith, who's Washington Bureau Chief to The Guardian, who's obviously been following this newspaper. Do we know anything more about the gunman yet, David? Good morning.
Hello. Well, we know he's 18. Immediate question marks over how he could have obtained an assault rifle. I think there'll be debate over that. And in an online manifesto that he apparently published, he actually gave some details himself of how this tragedy came about. He wrote that he had moved farther to the right politically over the last 3 years. He'd been radicalized by the internet, particularly browsing 4chan, the online message board that is full of white supremacist and racist content, and he started that for what he said was extreme boredom during the early days of the coronavirus pandemic. He said that posts that he'd read there made him believe that the white race is dying out.
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway.
Of racism and really ultimately seems to embrace something that's known as great replacement theory, this idea that in America...
Continue on the Parkway for 1 mile.
...being deliberately replaced by people of colour.
Not limited just to the US, I understand, David. He also focused on the Rotherham grooming, Asian grooming gangs, and London Mayor Sadiq Khan.
That's right. On page 165 of this very long manifesto that he wrote, he talks about Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, described him as a Pakistani Muslim invader. This is a representative of the people of London, the very heart of the British Isles. What better sign of the white rebirth and the removal of this invader, he wrote, and he had Sadiq Khan on a so-called kill list, along with 2 other people, the philanthropist George Soros and Recep Erdogan, the leader of Turkey. By coincidence, Sadiq Khan has just been in the US trying to promote tourism. So this is obviously a very, very chilling mention, and so I think that the gunman here was taking a very global view. He also praised other killers who've committed racist violence.
He's not a local, I understand, David. Do we know why he picked Buffalo?
No. He again in this manifesto he wrote that he was planning this, but he deliberately did not name the store, just in case the authorities intervened. One clue he did give as to why Buffalo, though, was he said he was going to pick somewhere with a high percentage of black people. And indeed, the store was
in a quarter of a mile at Wagoners Roundabout, take the 2nd exit and stay on the Parkway, A312.
Grateful for your your time, David. Obviously, you've been busy all morning and all night, and this morning, David Smith, Washington Bureau Chief for The Guardian. More coverage, of course, on the newspaper there, if you want to pick up on that story. We'll come back to our conversation. David, I do hope you can hold the other side of the NHS. There's a good line here, by the way. I mean, just to give you the numbers again, Mr. Hunt was in post for 6 years, so if anybody was going to put it right, you thought he'd had a bit of time. He left 4 years ago. He's taken this long to tell us all about it. As one newspaper points out, in 2015, when he was in his full pomp, he pledged to hire 5,000 more GPs within 5 years. The total went down instead of up. That's Hunt's stewardship of the NHS. More on that with your calls, as I say. Also coming up after the news, a night to remember and a night fit for the Queen.
Very humbly, thank you.
Exit the roundabout onto the parkway. Continue on A312 for 1.5 miles.
Mohammed Jalili probably with the line of the night. More after this. It is 7:30. You're listening to Breakfast with me, Nick Ferrari, here on LBC, the news, Simon Conway.
The Prime Minister's to visit Belfast later to urge the main parties in Northern Ireland to get back to work. Boris Johnson says the UK will have a necessity to act if the EU is unwilling to compromise in the crisis over post-Brexit trading arrangements. Limits on how police use stop-and-search powers are to be permanently lifted, which the government hopes will help tackle violent crime. But there are concerns about the disproportionate impact on some communities. A 3-year-old boy has died after it's believed he was attacked by a dog in Greater Manchester. Police are investigating the circumstances and previous incidents involving dogs at the home in Rochdale. LBC weather, rain and heavy showers will move north, becoming dry in the south and warm in the sunshine, a high of 23 degrees.
Tonight, with Andrew Marr from 6 p.m, only on LBC.
Mayor of Greater Manchester joins me live in Manchester now, Andy Burnham. What is levelling up?
It's about regional inequality and closing it. You can't have a mature country where the regions have their voice and their influence if that's how it works, where we all have to go on bended knee, praise everybody on that. Please, can we have a little bit of funding to sort something out here? It can't work like that.
Tonight, with Andrew Marr from 6 p.m. Listen on your radio and on Global Player. LBC.
If you want to change the world, all you need is less plastics in our oceans, less carbon in our skies, less chemicals on vegetables, less wildlife that dies. Get a carbon neutral shop delivered to your door with Able and Coal Organic. You're getting so much more. Enjoy £10 off each of your first 3 shops of £20 or more with the code ORGANIC. ableandcoal.co.uk. Easy, organic, everything. Conditions apply.
To help you travel with confidence on the TfL network, we're cleaning regularly with antiviral disinfectant, providing over 1,000 free hand sanitizer stations, and frequently circulating fresh air on tubes, buses and trains. To help everyone feel safe, we strongly recommend that you continue to wear a face covering when travelling on our services, unless you are exempt. Thank you for helping to keep yourself and others safe. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Through our trusted dealers, feel good your way with Hey Car. T's and C's apply.
Join me, Rachel Johnson, as I sit down with women at the forefront of change. Recently, I was joined by Emily Thornberry.
He spent his time trying to goad us into having a general election. We should have had, if we were going to have an election on one issue, it's called a referendum. We should have had a referendum.
Rachel Johnson's Difficult Women.
Listen to the full podcast on Global Player.
Tax credits are ending and the Department for Work and Pensions will be moving people across to Universal Credit by 2024. Search Understanding Universal Credit to find out more. Eligibility criteria apply.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
We're just going on set. No, it is now 7:34. David, you'll be the next caller on Jeremy Hunt's view of the NHS. Let's jump into the world of business and finance, though. And look first at a rather gloomy prediction from economists about inflation. Comments now from business commentator, journalist and broadcaster Michael Wilson, who joins me now. I say gloomy forecast. Economists normally give gloomy forecasts, but this is a bad one about inflation. Michael, good morning.
It is, yeah. 9% will be announced probably on Wednesday, and then there's worse to come.